Well, the Brewers lose their opener of a 6-game road trip, but they have bigger problems if Robert Gasser's got to miss an extended amount of time. We'll talk about that coming up next here on Locked On Brewers.
You are Locked On Brewers, your daily Milwaukee Brewers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yeah, Brewers still playing well. Just a setback. Start off the road trip. You know, it's 162 games. You're going to lose a game every once in a while. And the Brewers still playing some great ball. 12 games over the 500 mark. 3-1 loss in Philadelphia. Not a lot of nuts and bolts in this game. Rhys Hoskins goes yard. Brewers had chances early in this game to put up some numbers. Didn't do it. And, I just thought in this game, you look at it and just a loss. It wasn't like Philadelphia destroyed them. Brewers had a night off offensively, really couldn't do much, and they lose the game. One thing I was surprised about, you look at all the offensive categories the Brewers are in, they're amongst the leaders in many, many categories. And that would be surprising if you see all the low-scoring games they've played this year. We'll get to that coming up here in a little bit. Chuck Freeman, Locked On Brewers, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Get us on Google, Spotify, Apple, Run, all the major downloads, wherever you get your podcasts, whatever platform you use, Locked On Brewers is there. And, of course, our growing YouTube page. Please hit me up on YouTube. Search Locked On Brewers. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell. That'll alert you every time we drop an episode here on Locked On Brewers. Also on Twitter, Chuck Freeman, Freimund. Now, I've learned this I knew this a long time ago about social media. Some people just can't control themselves. I did have to ban one guy. I just had to block him. I warned him. And, it's like a little kid. You got to warn him, and before you got to sit him in the corner. He just kept on coming after me and coming after me and coming after me. And I'm like, enough. I mean, plus he's coming at me with not his real name, an avatar. If you all want to use avatars, that's great. But if you're going to, continue to pound me and be hypocritical by using an avatar, then I'm just, enough is enough. So, but I also love reading your comments, as I've told you before, and I was responded to a few of you guys who did write me on YouTube. I appreciate that. But the Brewers do lose. Rhys Hoskins made his return. Hit a home run in this game, was booed, was cheered. Some thought maybe he got a little misty-eyed there. Teammates showed him mad respect. This guy, it wasn't like he spent 15 years in Philadelphia, but he spent an impactful amount of time with Philly. And if you know Philadelphia fans, they love guys who are fighters. They love guys who play with a passion. They love their Allen Iversons, a guy who will play with passions, a Doc Irving, a guy who will play with passion, a Reggie White, a guy who will play with passion. Those type of guys, they love a guy who play with guys who play with a lot of heart. And Rhys Hoskins was a guy who was both great for the Philadelphia community, and he put up a couple of numbers or two in his time there. So he jacked the home run. They booed him as he rounded the bases, and then they cheered him as he touched home plate. But Rhys made his return to Philadelphia, and who knows, maybe one day might be back there. But for now, he's ours, and we love him in the heart of the Brewer lineup as long as he is healthy, and he did hit the home run. Stole second base. Realmuto stole second base and then tried to score on a base hit and was thrown out at home plate on a tag. Head first slide by Hoskins coming in. He was out, and a little exchange between Realmuto and Hoskins at home plate. But nonetheless, the Brewers did use an opener. I see some of you on Twitter asking me, why are we going with this opener? I don't have any problem with going with the opener. I don't. Letting a guy pitch, especially against a team like the Phillies, who have some pretty good left-handed bats at the top of the order, coming out there and throwing Koenig at the top of the order, a left-handed pitcher. So I don't have any problem with that at all. And then your starting pitcher in the second or third inning. No, I don't have any problem with that. I mean, if you wanted to use your lefty coming up later on in the bullpen a little bit later on, that's where you're going to be hurt, but you're going to have to take that loss somewhere. But I don't have a problem with that. And, Wilson pitched 5 2/3. How many pitches did he throw here? 91 pitches, gave up 3 runs. All right. He pitched all right. I think Bryce Wilson gave him a heck of an effort, whether he starts or, they have a pitcher come in there for an inning or two and before he takes over. So yeah, this idea of going with an opener, it doesn't bother me. It sounds worse than it is. It sounds like, boy, because if you think about it, like, well, the Brewers used this a few years ago in September. Are you really, it sounds like you're really like going to your bullpen right away, but you're eventually going to go to your bullpen anyway, because Wilson's not going 8 innings out there or 7 innings. He's probably going 6 innings, like the 5 2/3 he had tonight. So whether you use that reliever in the 7th inning or to start a game, I don't have any problem. And I like the strategy here, coming out and using him against the left-handed bats of the Phillies, Candies. So that was that. But not a lot of nuts and bolts to this game. Hoskins made his return. What bothered me most is the news that happened before the game with Robert Gasser seeking a second opinion on that elbow. We're going to get to that coming up here in a little bit. Chuck Freeman here on Locked On Brewers, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. FanDuel, it's winner take all. And the NBA and NHL, FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. $150 in bonus bets. Bet on spreads, money lines, player props, you name it. Take that $150 and use it any way you want. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. NBA Finals coming up here this week. FanDuel, get in on all the action. They're America's #1 sportsbook for a number of different reasons. Visit FanDuel.com to look at the odds and see for yourself all the great odds that they have there. But join FanDuel, get on the action, the Stanley Cup, NBA, and of course, Major League Baseball with FanDuel. Chuck Freeman here on Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. All right, Robert Gasser. Soreness, tightness in the elbow. Now, he had the bone spurs earlier in the season in the elbow, and apparently there's tightness and soreness right now that he's seeking a second opinion. That scares the heck out of me when he seeks a second opinion. Rarely do you see a guy get a second opinion if the first opinion is like, oh boy, gets a lump in your throat. That second opinion usually is because you don't like what they told you with that first opinion. Let's get a second opinion. I hate to go down that road, but let's face it, most of the time that's the case. And I don't want to even think about the extreme, because anytime somebody comes down with an elbow, we've had that happen with Wade Miley. You think of the worst, don't we? We think of the worst with an elbow. And God, I pray to God that this is not a situation like that for Robert Gasser. Not only does the kid have a bright future ahead of him in Major League Baseball, but he's a big part of the starting rotation after starting the year down in the minors. But that was the news. 2-0 record, a 2.57 earned run average. They've only lost one of his starts so far this year. So games that he started, they've only lost once. But we'll see how that checks out for Mr. Gasser here as he gets that a second opinion. But assuming at the very least that he's got to go on the injured list, he's going to join a Brewers injured list of these pitchers: DL Hall, Junis, Ross, Miley, Woody, who was already there, Brandon Woodruff, and then add him. So it would be, if he goes on the DL, and if he's seeking a second opinion, chances are he's going to go on the IL, as we call it now. It would be Gasser, DL Hall, Junis, Ross, and Miley. 5 starting pitchers on the injured list. That's incredible. You would think the Brewers are where the White Sox are right now, but that is phenomenal that they've had this many injuries with the starting rotation. This many guys go down. Now, here's your starting rotation. If Gasser has got to go on the injured list: Freddie at the top, Colin Ray. Well, Bryce Wilson is the number 2. Colin Ray 3. And Tobias Myers is your 4th starter, right? And who would be your number 5? Who would it be? I mean, I was looking at the minor league. I mean, I don't know who it'd be. You already got your middle reliever, Bryce Wilson, who went from a middle reliever's job to the number 2 guy now in this starting rotation. You have Colin Ray, who spent half of the year in the minors last year, your number 3 guy in this rotation. And Myers, down at AAA, would be your 4th guy in this rotation. And the 5th guy, I have no clue. I have no clue who would be that 5th guy right now, who they'd turn to. But the injured list, Hall, Junis, Ross, Miley, and then, of course, Woodruff. I'll put an asterisk next to Woodruff because we knew to start the season that he was not playing anyway this year. But that's just an incredible rotation. You're saying, how is this team in first place? How do they have such a substantial lead in this division? My God. And I keep getting asked. I'll get asked on Twitter. I'll ask, I was on on Mondays, I'm on ESPN Radio Lacrosse. They have me on at 4:30 to talk Brewers baseball, representing Locked On Brewers. And they ask me all the time, how are the Brewers hanging in there? And it's amazing. It's just amazing how they keep making exchanges between here and AAA. And I don't know. I mean, even going out and getting yourself another starting pitcher. Well, they're going to need a 5th starter. And you hear that the Mets are interested in unloading some of their guys already, because the Mets, once again, just like last year, the Mets were selling players. That's how the Brewers got Mark Canha. They got him from the Mets. It sounds like Sean Manaea, Severino, and Quintana, all 3 of those guys are going to be on the market for the Mets. Now, I'm not giving up any of my top prospects for any of those guys. Of the 3 guys, I like Severino the best. I would say Severino. I'd take him. But add Severino to this rotation. Okay, I guess you'd put him in. You add him to the rotation, and obviously he's going to help the rotation, but at what cost? But it's almost to a point with that 5th guy, the warm body theory. I mean, you got to find somebody. You thought that warm body theory was with Bryce Wilson, who was fine in middle relief, but now you just can't take him out of the starting rotation. You thought after a while, man, you had Wilson in that starting rotation, that eventually you'd be able to move him back into middle relief. But he's in the rotation for the foreseeable future, and in the heart of that rotation as the number 2 starter. Again, you look at the injuries and all that, you say, how is this team still hanging in there? How are they still doing it? Offensively, the eye test would show you, if you watch every game, and you see how futile sometimes these guys can be offensively, you'd say, oh, they got to be toward the bottom of the league in offense, just like last year. But I looked at some stats today. They're 2nd in baseball in hits, 2nd in runs, 2nd in batting average, 2nd in runs to the Phillies, so they play tonight. So a lot of the top offensive categories, the Brewers are right there in offense, scoring runs. Now, is it because sometimes it's feast or famine? Where they'll not score, like last week, they'll not score anything in the first 2 games against the Cubs, and then they'll explode for a 10 spot, and then the 6 spot the next day. Is that what it is? It's just like some days they'll just go off an offensive explosion, and that'll offset some of the bad nights they have. Because consistency, they're not a very consistent offense. They're just not. They're just not a consistent offense. They're one of the worst teams in baseball, though, with the bases loaded. I think with the bases loaded, they're leading like 166, 167 on the year. Not very good. But so many offensive categories. But that's why some of these numbers could be misleading. Because one day you could explode, the next 3 days you might not be able to get out of your own way. But that's just pretty amazing. I was just looking through all the numbers today and just seeing how high they are in a bunch of offensive categories. And when there's like tonight, the 3-1 game, we've been down that road so many times with these guys. But should the Brewers pursue any of those Mets pitchers? Severino, I mean, I take all 3 of them. I'll take all 3. But as I said, at what price? not giving up my top prospects, nothing. And it's not going to, I wouldn't think it would cost you any of that. But you're going to have to deal some prospects, probably some level A prospects for some of these guys. We'll see. We'll see where the Mets are, but that's just was being reported that the Mets are shopping their guys, several of their guys that were on offense too. Some of the hitters on their team, including their pitching staff. So the Mets are already tanking it. Davis Stearns fire sale June 1st. How about that? But I definitely would be interested in some of those guys. It just has to, what the price is going to be. All right. Ortiz continues the rake. A former Brewer was released by another team who he had high hopes from when he was here. We'll talk about that coming up next here on Locked On Brewers. Chuck Freeman here on Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. eBay Motors, passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle, level up to peak performance, superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You always find exactly what you're looking for with eBay Guaranteed Fit. Your part is guaranteed to fit your ride. Guy down the street, I've been telling you, he uses eBay Guaranteed Fit, and he swears by eBay Motors. You're burning rubber, not cash with eBay Motors. eBay Motors, you need a part with over 122 million parts for your car, your ride. They will help you out. All the parts you need, the prices you want, easy to make your car the MVP of your neighborhood, maybe even your city. Bring home a huge win. Keep your ride or die alive with ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available for U.S. customers. Chuck Freeman here on Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Yesterday on the show, on the podcast, I said, I've never run into any Brewer fans who are from out of state who didn't have some sort of connection to the state of Wisconsin. And then I went on YouTube this morning because when I get up in the morning, I do check the comments. I check my Twitter, see what you all have to say about the game and anything you had to say about the show. And a couple of you guys told me that you follow the podcast, you watch the podcast, you listen to the podcast every day, and that you've been a lifelong Brewer fan. I don't know how, because baseball's a regional sport to begin with. And I can see it being a Yankee fan or Red Sox fans, Cubs fans, Dodger fans. Yeah, they're everywhere. The big markets will have nationwide. But Brewer fans, I've always looked at it like, well, unless you're from Wisconsin, it's a regional sport. You're probably not a Brewers fan if you don't have a connection to Wisconsin. And let's say you're living in Colorado. You're not living in, or you're living in Texas or whatever. But I'm finding some of you guys tweeted at me today and said, yes, you've been Brewers fans all your life, and you make visits to AmFam Field to see the Brewers once a year. That's great. That's great. Keep it up, man. Keep it up, Brewers fandom. Joey Ortiz. Some of you tweet at me still about that Corbin Burns trade that, I shot down. I did not like the move, obviously. But I got to hand it to Ortiz. Rookie of the month for the month of May. Only the 8th Brewer player to be rookie of the month. Fantastic. Yeah, Joey Ortiz. There's no doubt. I mean, I'd be a fool if I told you, well, he's, of course I'm going to wait through the whole season and see how it plays out and see how his career plays out. And let's see how things evolve here in the next couple of months. But through the first 2 months, especially this last month, he's been one of the best third basemen in baseball, deserving even of an all-star appearance. Now, he's probably not going to get it, obviously. Number one, he's in Milwaukee, no name recognition, that sort of thing. We know how the all-star game works. A lot of it's politics. And, of course, when you're buried in Milwaukee, don't get me started on that. But Ortiz, you stack his numbers up with a lot of third basemen in Major League Baseball, not just the National League, Major League Baseball. And he's among the best third basemen offensively, defensively, and the big moments he's come in and produced for this team. So, yeah, Ortiz, keep going. filling that third base spot. I've always said I want my third baseman to be a big bopper. He's not. He can hit you a home run. He can muscle up and hit you one, but he's doing a great job right there at third base right now. And yeah, I love him at third base. We'll see how this right now I do. Let's see how it pans out. Give it a few more times. You know me, I like to let it marinate a little bit. I know Brewers fans, sports fans in general, we like to jump all in and be all in on this guy. But with Ortiz, I'm going to give it a little bit more time. But so far, the early returns we like. Keston Hiura was released by the Detroit Tigers, spent most of his time at AAA Toledo as their first baseman. Boy, you feel for the kid, Keston Hiura. And he was one of those guys who was, when we talked about the Ortiz being the 8th Brewer rookie to be named Player of the Month, Keston Hiura was Player of the Month, I believe, of May or June of 2019 when he came up with the team. But released by Detroit, and we'll see where he ends up. Just flat out released. How about that? It feels for the guy because we all thought he was going to be a real good player, integral part of this team, but he's definitely not. He'll probably catch on somewhere, but obviously he's one of these guys who can hit AAA pitching, but he's not good enough to play in the majors. God, there was one other thing someone tweeted at me and asked me about today. I can't remember what exactly it was. The Brewers will wind up the series on Wednesday afternoon, 3:10 the start. Tuesday, 5:40 start, Central Times. And you get the game on SiriusXM, the SXM app. Search Brewers. I'll give you all 162 of Brewers baseball, the home team call on Sirius and SiriusXM. Appreciate our partnership with SiriusXM. I heard some of you said, hey, I've heard your promos on SiriusXM. Yes, we have a nice little deal with SiriusXM, and I'm proud that we're a part of it. Christopher Sanchez, left-handed pitcher on the mound for Philadelphia on Tuesday. Colin Ray, after the opener by Koenig. Koenig will pitch the opener, and then it's Colin Ray's turn to take over and see what Colin can do. And then Wednesday, I didn't see who the Brewers were pitching Wednesday, but we'll see. Cross your fingers on Robert Gasser having that second opinion. This is big right here. This is huge because not only is Gasser a huge part of this team this year going forward, if this team wants to get into the playoffs, but obviously Robert Gasser, a huge part of the Milwaukee Brewers going forward. Control, left-hander, the real deal. Let's hope that it's not the worst with him with the elbow. Just saying. But 2-0, 2.57 earned run average. They've won all but one of his starts so far. And gosh, I wanted to see him keep that thing going. We'll see how that second opinion checks out. And hopefully we'll have some more news on Robert Gasser tomorrow. All right, that's going to do it for the show. Everybody, please hit me up on Twitter. Chuck Freeman, Freimund. Hit me up on Twitter. And we've all talked about a Brewer meetup sometime. Somebody DM'd me 2 days ago, asked me, are we still going to do that Brewer meetup, that Locked On Brewers meetup? Still want to do it. I talked about this early in the season. I got to figure out how we're going to do this, if it's going to be a weekday, if it's going to be a weekend when the Brewers are home, if it's going to be a place maybe around AmFam Field, what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. First couple beers will be on me. I know that'll entice some of you guys to come out. But yeah, I'm not going to invite you to do a Locked On Brewers segment if your boy Freeman's not going to buy you a beer or two. So I'm not that way. I'm gonna spend some money on you all. You guys give me your time every day. All you everydayers watching this show and listening to the podcast, I'd like to do something for you, and I want to have this Locked On Brewers meetup somewhere down the road. Take your suggestions as always, but I don't know if we should do it at a non-game, a home game, a game on the road, but anyway we do it, we will somehow get it done. You get the show on Google, Spotify, Apple, on all the major downloads of any podcast platform out there. Locked On Brewers is there. Please always hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. It's all free. And of course, Locked On Brewers is on YouTube. Please subscribe to our growing YouTube page. Look at me for a half hour. And if not, turn the screen off. At least you can hear the podcast. Locked On Brewers, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. That'll alert you every time we drop an episode here on Locked On Brewers. Brewers lose the opener 3-1. We'll see with Colin Ray, and most importantly, the offense and how Robert Gasser checks out tomorrow. So long, everybody. Have yourself a great Tuesday.